Hello, and welcome to the end of the year. We're beginning our countdown to 2025. Now, of course, we have pretty much the rest of December at the time of recording this to go, so there's no need to make a best of or any such thing at the moment because things can change. There's a lot of reading still to go. One thing that will not change are the books that I've read that were released in 2024. Apart from the fact that I am currently reading Wind and Truth, but that will get its own individual review at the time, so not necessary at this moment. You get like a 40-minute video probably with me talking about Stormlight Archive. This video is very much for people like me most often. I have a list of books that came out in 2024 that I didn't read that I want to pick up in paperback because I couldn't justify the hardback to myself. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the books that I read that were released in 2024 that I got thanks to ARCs or that I just picked up myself, and I will kind of rate them on, give it a miss, pick it up in paperback, or it was probably worth the hardback, you know? So I think that's a good way of doing it, because I think that's a way of this video having value, because those books are going to come out with 2025 is going to be a book. 2025 is going to be a book. 2025 is going to be a year that these books will come out in paperback. So I still think there's value in discussing them. I'm going to go in chronological order of release. If you do enjoy this, please do like, please do subscribe. Let me know what you read in 2024 releases. What would you recommend to me? What would you tell me to avoid? What do you think I should pick up in paperback in 2025? To begin, on the 9th of January, My Friends by Hisham Matar came out, which was longlisted for the Booker Prize, which is why I picked it up. So even though it came out in January, I don't think I read it until September, something like that. When were we away? When we were in Kelowna? Was that August? Okay, August into September. This was unfortunately only longlisted. It didn't get moved forward, no matter how much I think it should have been moved forward. Apparently they don't take my opinion into consideration. I gave this 4.25 stars. This is a book that I definitely would recommend to pick up in paperback. It follows the life of Khalid, born in Benghazi, who ends up migrating to the UK for a reason which, well, there's a reason where he then has to remain in the UK, and the story follows kind of his life in the UK, the people he meets, people from Benghazi who he knew as children, people he was inspired by, etc. And it all follows the fact that that Benghazi and Libya in general at the time are under Gaddafi rule when he is in Benghazi. Naturally, he wants to escape that. Who would have thunk it? People don't want to live under dictatorship. And essentially, the reason I love this book in particular is because we follow a character who is the most passive man that's ever existed. And in the year of our Lord 2024, if there is a bigger feeling among people who are unhappy than pure passivity, I don't know what the word is. The book has these two main characters that you are caught between. Two friends of Khalid. One is an impassioned man, someone who wants to strike out, someone who has all of this rage and anger and passion inside of him. And the other is this guy who's been kind of subdued and who had a voice but has receded and become submissive and doesn't want to be punished. And so he is much more like he is just this guy who wants to float along and live contentedly without challenging the status quo. And so our character is caught between the emotions of these two people, the arguments of these two people, and it becomes an almost like philosophical devil and angel on the shoulder, but these two antithetical views of how to deal with the rule of Libya and the rule of Gaddafi and the aftermath and everything to do with it, where I just found it riveting. I found it incredible to read such a nuanced perspective of this guy just caught and having no idea of what to do, because I think a lot of people hearing that would be like, no, I understand that, but I get that. Because I think we all do. If that sounds entertaining to you, then I would recommend it. A lot of people didn't like the book because they thought it was too slow paced, they thought the character was too passive. I think in terms of, now that I've explained it, if you have that as a kind of idea of what to focus on going in, then I think you find a lot there. Whereas sometimes finding that channel to focus on is difficult, and so and if you're just not interested, then you're done for. So recommend that in paperback. Next up is The Bullet Swallower. I read this back in December, actually. December of 2023 I read this as an ARC, and as you can see I have no physical copy here. I dare say that sums up my whole point on this book. It was on the Goodreads Choice Awards for historical fiction. Evidently there wasn't a lot of historical fiction out last year. I gave the book a 2.5 stars. I think it was very mid. I don't remember a lot, honestly, other than the book's split into dual timelines. We follow like this Mexican bandito in like late 19th century who is crossing the border to go to Texas to save his family. And then we have like a modern character, well, modern, like 60s character, 70s character who is kind of reflecting on the fact that that's his family and the heritage, etc. And the book boasts this idea of a magical realism western, and the magical realism is so loose and barely there that I had a very different expectation going in. It is horribly mismarketed, in my opinion, by saying magical realism. I found the book, the writing style, to be generally plodding. I didn't find a lot of character inside of it. And naturally, for me, reading a magical realism book, the writing has to be the thing that conveys that magical element. Like, you can state that some freaky shit's going on, but unless you're using the language, the emotion, like the emotiveness to be able to convey this feeling of otherworldly things happening inside of our real world, there's a jarring nature. And I just think the book lacked that, because it's also a western, so it's super dry, and I just think those two things in this book didn't quite meld the way that I was hoping it to. So yeah, that has to be just a 2.5 for me. It was a disappointing one. After that comes The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. One of the big fantasy releases of the year, honestly, which I did not anticipate when I requested it. I just saw Robert Jackson Bennett. I'd been interested in Foundry Side, hearing people talk about it, and I thought, new series, good time to jump on board. Which evidently I think a lot of people did, or they were prior fans, naturally. But The Tainted Cup really seems to have caught people. Personally, I did not buy a hardback after reading it. I think it is definitely like a paperback pickup. I gave it a 3.75, and that's for very specific reasons. I found the central characters to be extremely interesting. Essentially, we're following Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson kind of situation. Our main character is the Watson watching this older lady who is in this fantastical world with all kinds of crazy shit. There's like these leviathans, these kind of like eldritch massive creatures, and like all this kind of stuff going on, and that the idea is that they have this like barrier that they have to protect, because otherwise these monsters will get in. Very Attack on Titan, which we'll get into. And yeah, so I found that the central characters were really compelling. They were a lot of fun. The Sherlock Holmes character is extremely funny. She is fantastic. But my main issue comes to that this is a crime mystery book. And when it's a whodunit or what happened type of thing, but we're in a fantasy world where the solutions are based on a magic system that we have absolutely no founding in or no understanding of, the book loses me, because there's no point where I feel like I can discover what happened. You know, when you're investigating a grounded murder and then suddenly they're like, well, this, it turns out they used a mushroom from the Mushroom Kingdom of Gardevoir, which turns people into, and it's like, you've lost me. How was I ever meant to get to that conclusion? I understand that a lot of people don't read murder mysteries to guess what happened. I do. I love doing that. I love reading like an Agatha Christie book, and the entire time I'm like, I think they did it, and now I think that they did it, and I think this is why they did it. And because then at the end, guess what? You've probably nailed one on, and you could be like, guess that at the beginning. But you can't do that with Tainted Cup. So that was my main issue, along with the fact that the world building is like you've taken 5 different IPs and slammed them together. However, as much as I've said that, I have requested the second book and got it, because I think that it's a series that he needs to find his footing in as well, because there's a lot of world building to convey in a murder mystery that didn't quite gel for me. But now that we're moving on to a second book and the world can expand and we know a bit more going in, then I think there is a lot more to go on, and I think I'll have a lot more hope in terms of the rest of the series, so that I will continue with it. So I recommend it as a paperback buy for that reason. Next up, The Warm Hand of Ghosts by Katherine Arden, I just read. This was one that we purchased before, and by we, I very much mean Grace, purchased before we actually read it, because Grace loves the Winter Night trilogy. She was always going to get it. And I was interested in it as well. The only reason I put off reading it is because it was here and I was at university instead for the first half of the year when it came out. I gave this one a 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed it. This is one that I think you could go either way on. The Warm Hand of Ghosts is a historical fantasy, World War One, where we follow Laura Ivan. Is that the name? Yeah. She's a nurse in World War One who has been to the front lines, returned home, and on returning home there has been the Halifax boat disaster, which was like an explosion that ravaged Halifax, and essentially her family are murdered, like the boat killed them. Her family die in that, but her brother is on the front line still, and so they're the only 2 surviving members of the family. And she gets this. She essentially thinks that her brother is dead based on the stuff that she receives back home, but due to this otherworldly, supernatural, fantastical goings on, she also has reason to believe that her brother is still alive. And this is another dual narrative where we follow both her and her brother in different situations. And essentially the book to me gets really good when we have this, when the magic is kind of revealed, and we get, I was describing it as like Dracula meets Faust, like Dr. Faustus. It's a Faustian deal type creature with Dracula style gothic supernatural mannerisms and goings on. That really worked well. I loved it. It's very World War One, so if you're not into that, steer clear, just to be warned. But I found myself really enjoying the world, like the second half of this book. Is the reason it doesn't quite get to a 4.5 for me is because the first half was kind of dry, in the sense of I was waiting for it to go where it wanted to go, and when it did, it banged, but it just took a while getting there. Next, I don't have it with me, it's still in the UK, is Knife by Salman Rushdie, which was the book that he wrote, a memoir he wrote after the attack that he suffered while at giving like a talk, and he was stabbed however many times it was, I don't remember, like 17 or something, and it was very much believed that he was going to die, and he's now like blind in one eye because of it. He got stabbed in the throat, all kinds of things, and the reason is because of it was the culmination of a fatwa that was put on him due to the satanic verses like 2 decades before. And essentially, rather than going into the person who attacked him and why, etc., because essentially he's like, this person didn't read the satanic verses, they said that they read like the odd line, and they weren't alive when the fatwa was put in place, and they were just like, this was not to do with that, it was just someone using that as a way. And so that person is never named. The power is taken away from the person who tried to attack, and instead it's very much about him in that situation and the love that was in his life, be it the partner that we didn't know he had. He goes into the idea that he had this relationship was married, and it was not public knowledge. He was keeping it, and that had to come out when this happened, to do with his family, his sons, and them traveling to see him. All of this, and he does it in a classic Rushdie way, which is subversion. He subverts the idea of what you expect going in. It is all about love and compassion and the life he shared and the struggles that he goes through, because it is an extremely difficult, frustrating experience for him. Like the descriptions of him trying to get back to where he was, and the physical ailments that he now has because of it. And also he uses it as a way to explore like the relationship with his father. There is an amazing scene where he's like looking in a mirror, and he like sees himself as a child and also his father and the experiences he had, his father being an alcoholic, all of this in a way that is, it's like as close to literary fiction as you can get for a memoir to be in certain sections. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. It's one that, once again, I would recommend. Pick it up however you can. It was extremely powerful. And of course, I think you have to be, because he makes it so much about himself, you have to be invested in Salman Rushdie. It's not one of those you can pick up being like, well, a guy was stabbed 17 times, it was crazy, I want to find out about that. It doesn't really go into it. It's much more just about him. So that's a big thing to know in terms of that. The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence. Book 2 in the Library trilogy, following the book that wouldn't burn. I gave the first book 4 stars, and I think I gave this book 3.5 stars. There'll be a shared theme between this and another book later on, which is that the first book set up this. It was quite a simple allegory to real life. You completely understood what he was trying to say. And as a result, you can do that in book 1 to then expand in book 2 and really explore all the nuances. And instead, this book didn't quite go into them the way I wanted them to. In fact, it backtracked in a lot of places. There were certain things that I felt were too easy, too brushed over. And I would have enjoyed a lot more exploration. This book is much shorter than the first book. Maybe that's to do with it. Maybe he just didn't want to, but that's what I was looking for based on what the first book set up. Because it's all to do with this idea of two cultures that don't work together, that are constantly at odds, that are discriminatory towards each other. And the second book introduces a kind of a nuance to it where it changes how you view the world. And so I thought the second book would explore that, because it's kind of the central mystery of the first book. And it didn't quite. It didn't go as far as I wanted it to. So 3.5 stars, it was still a compelling read, still an interesting read, but it lacked that depth that I wanted to get it to a really great piece. So personally, if you're someone who just values how books look, you're like, I don't even care about the content, then I think this series is setting up to be one of the most beautiful trilogies that I've seen. So from that perspective, buy the hardback. If you're a fucking glutton for design, that's it. If it's the content, I would wait for the paperback, get them all in paperback and have a nice time with those. I don't think that they're worth the hardback based on the content so far, other than the fact that I am invested in the series now. If I'm someone getting into it, I would recommend just waiting for the paperback. Ghost Mountain by Ronan Hession is his Ghost Mountain by Ronan Hession is his third novel, and it bangs. It bangs real hard. This was a 4.5 as well. Thoroughly enjoyed this. Ro is an Irish author who has previously done Leonard and Hungry Paul and Panenka, both books that I love. Panenka is still my favourite out of the 3. But in terms of in terms of the catalogue that he is producing, Ghost Mountain is my second favourite, and also provides a very different tone and view compared to other Ro Hession books. Panenka and Leonard and Hungry Paul both focus on this, the connectivity between people, the way that people who may differ, have different opinions, people who are in different places in life, can find connection and find peace within each other, and overcome problems that they've had. Ghost Mountain focuses on the gaps, focuses on how those gaps form, how they linger, the way that problems often arise from how we compose them for ourselves. This idea of how we create images, how we create thoughts, and the way we perceive things, and they linger and fester and they corrupt and they break, and it's all about this kind of coldness the book is, compared to the warming of his other books. Personally, I loved it for that reason, because the last thing I want is for him to be an author that produces similar feelings in all his books. Instead, I think what this does is it really makes you appreciate the fact that he understands a much wider range of human experience and wants to convey more than just that. The book essentially follows that a mountain has appeared out of nowhere one day. No one knows where it came from, whether it just appeared one day, whether it slowly grew. It's just there, and it's about the people's lives that happen around it. It's a departure from his usual stuff. It's still extremely funny, still extremely heartbreaking. Got a lot of the same vibes in terms of that. It's the same... you can tell it's the same author, but he's approaching things from a very different way that I think was exciting. Recommend it, getting it in whatever form, hardback. It's a really gorgeous cover. But yeah, do what you want. We have Private Rites by Julia Armfield, following on from Our Wives Under the Sea. This is a King Lear, not retelling, kind of a reworking, which is that we follow three daughters after their father has died, and they're working out what to do with the inheritance, essentially. This book is dark, told in a very twisted way, very gothic. The characters are horrendous. They say horrendous things, they think horrendous things. It is the most... I don't know how to describe it. It just dives into this this kind of fetid tank of a cesspit, and really lingers you there. That works because we are set in a kind of dystopian future, near future of the UK, where it does not stop raining. I know what you're thinking. That must be really near future. I'm pretty sure that's been happening for the last fucking 100 years. But this is this is a it is the fact that it does not stop raining. Places are flooded. Train tracks have had to been built higher because the tracks have been flooded over time. Places are gone. You have to take, like, they're all new lines in terms of travel, and essentially it's people have days off when it doesn't rain. People are like, well, we're closing up, enjoy it, like, rather than like enjoy the sun, it's like enjoy the fact that you're not going to get pissed on. It delves into this, like, it references the idea of like illnesses that have become more prevalent because there's so much more moisture in the air. People have like swollen joints and all this stuff, and it's such a wonderful backdrop. And essentially we're following characters who ignore it. The book does a wonderful job of conveying this story where you are invested in the characters as they ignore a climate crisis, and it's like, oh, yep, I get what you're doing, and it's really good. I recommend it wholeheartedly. Like, I do think in terms of, because we already had the hardback, it's nice to have them together. They're real cute. We love to see it, even though because one's from England and one's from... Oh, wait, they're both... she just changed publisher. But real nice. We love to see it. Next up, one of the most disappointing reads of the year for me was The Sky on Fire by Jenn Lyons. Well, I gave it a 2.25 stars. I just didn't think it was very good. Reason being is that it has these wonderful ideas that are not explored in any way. People exist in this high up place. They live in this kind of heavenly-esque situation, and then other people live down this massive fall into this like kind of swampy rainforest type place. And we follow a character who is believed to have been murdered but actually wasn't. And we follow her as she attempts to get back up to the top because essentially a dragon rocks up in the prologue and it's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you all if you don't do what I need you to do. And yeah, the problem is that the book is too short. It's only about like 350 pages long, I think, and a lot happens. But because so much needs to happen, every scene feels like it has to have something climactic happen at the end of it. So the pace is relentless in the most boring way, in my opinion, where it's like it's essentially like you're having a conversation and you're like, oh, okay, we're getting characters. Oh, there's a big battle in your wall. Things are happening now. And it's just like, what the fuck? And then it's like, oh, we're out of there now. So we can slow down and have another conversation before, oh, it's a big bar. And it's that. It's a roller coaster. Rather than like a really fast paced, like consistent, it is this up and down of just like, I'm all over the place. I don't know what's happening and I don't care. Yeah, I just didn't enjoy it that much. 2.25 stars. There's really interesting things like this idea of dragon riders and the idea of how dragons in this scenario are like abusers. We never explore that. It's stated. We're like, that is what happens sometimes. And it's like a tertiary character. And I'm like, that's such a cool concept. Why are we both focusing on these boring fuckers? And when you read the synopsis on Sky and Fire, you feel like it's going to be more of that, and it's not. So, 2.25 stars, disappointing. I then read In the Shadow of the Fall by Tobi Ogundiran. I do not have a physical copy because I think novellas are too expensive, and there are only so many I can get before they are too much. So I do not have a physical copy. Make of that what you will. I gave the book 4 stars. I thought it was really solid. We follow a character, Ashake, who is this kind of acolyte in this religious order that worship the Orisha. The idea is that you are chosen by an Orisha and you hear their voice and you become their kind of manifestation on the earth. And she is not chosen. She has not been chosen. She becomes so like upset and annoyed by this that she kind of breaks free from it. And what you hear there makes you think it's going to be a very simple story in the sense of like, well, maybe the religious order weren't quite what you were thinking, and maybe that kind of thing. You know where I'm going. But instead, I've now read both halves of the duology, and what I think is really good is that there's a level of nuance to all of the factions inside the series where there's no quite right answer. Everyone's got a little bit wrong with them. Everything's got a little bit of a point. And I think it was really solid. Like I said, 4 stars. It had quite like stately prose. It was quite like to the point, but then had these flares of description that were really nice. And mainly I've said that my thing that I want is just, I would like longer pieces from him. I would now at this point, I've read a short story, I've read these 2 novellas, I would like a novel, please. Please provide a longer piece of work. The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey was a book I wasn't planning on reading. I was talking to Grace and I was like, I just don't think I'm going to. I don't think it's for me right now. And I just picked it up on a whim and I was really glad I did because I gave it 4.5 stars. This one I would recommend jumping in on. The way it's going so far, I think it's going to be a banger trilogy. So in my opinion, it's worth the hardback price. I think it was really solid. Essentially, we're in far future where, how to describe it? The problem is that the inciting incident takes a while to get to, so it's hard to judge how much to give away. But essentially, we're following a scientific team. It's a team of researchers, and at the beginning of the book, they're kind of working on a project, and it's to do with the inner politics of the groups around them and everything like that. And it's really interesting to begin with. A lot of people found it difficult, I saw, but I found the characters very interesting. You are waiting for it to go somewhere naturally, but when it does, it goes somewhere. This is a first contact in the best way, in my opinion. A first contact which is very much not afraid to go balls to the wall I mean, that's, you know what? I think I can say it. The series is called The Captives' War. We are following a first contact, which is with a society that are completely foreign to us in the sense of they have no concept of how humans view conflict or anything, and very interesting. It's a balls to the wall kind of vibe. I really enjoy it. 4.5 stars. I would recommend jumping on board. Then we've got The Ending Fire. The next most disappointing book I read in 2024. I gave this 2.25 stars. I'd read the first two books, The Final Strife and The Battle Drum. I enjoyed them decreasingly as they went along. The Ending Fire I just found so disappointing in the sense of the book switches perspectives into like people are now separated from each other, and there are contrivances that happen with one character in particular, one of the main characters, that she becomes sacrificed to this idea of an arc for a different character. And so you're following her and you're just like, I know what's happening. Please don't do this because this is contrived. I understand. And the whole book is this idea of like, I know what's happening. Don't do this. Just stop. And it doesn't. And it's all to get to this final point. And I was just like, that was lame. Then the last two came out on the same day, actually. The first is The City in Glass by Nevo, a novella, one that I justified buying to myself because I really enjoyed it. We are in a city which is looked over by a devil, this demon, and Victrine is that demon, and she's walking through the city one day, looking round, and like she's interacting with the people. She's like, oh, I've put them on this path, I've infused them with this, so that I think they're going to do this. And it's the idea of like this demon is playing Sims with this city and is messing with it. And at the end of that first chapter, angels arise and raze it to the ground, completely destroy it in this horrendously destructive scene. And I was like, oh, I'm in. And the rest of the book is Vo over time describing this demon as she tries to rebuild and reconstruct and craft a new society. And it was really interestingly told, in my opinion. The book is not the highest rated. I thought it was going to be higher rated. I personally really enjoyed it. I just maybe I'm a big city builder kind of guy, and this book is essentially all about city building, so I found it really interesting. If people aren't interested in that kind of thing, I can see why it wouldn't work. But City in Glass, once again, it's a novella. Can you justify the price? That is your individual decision. I'd already read the book, so knew I enjoyed it to buy it. A lot of people are having mixed experiences with it. Make your own decision there. And finally, ending on the most batshit fucking book I've ever read, is The Great Wen by Alan Moore. A book that, let alone buying it in hardback, paperback or not, I don't even know who to recommend this book to, as I said in my first one. This is set post-World War II, post the Blitz, in this fantastical realised world where there is a secret London. There is this other London. And we follow a main character who's a little bit of a dipshit, a little bit of an idiot, who becomes wrapped up in it when he buys a book that does not exist. It is a short story by Machen that is included in his short story N. And so it is a book that should not exist in our real world. It was never actually written, but it exists here because it's fallen out of the Great Wen. And he has it, and or Long London, I think it's called. And he's like essentially put on a mission where he has to return it. It's very Neverwhere, very that feeling, but it's told in the most laborious, verbose language that's ever been written. The book is incomprehensible at parts. It is wacky, wild, all over the place. Alan Moore unleashed himself in all the best and worst ways. But I will say, I said this before, you read The Great Wen, and I had this feeling of like, this is why people write. This is what writing is for. It's to let a madman unleash himself. It's to let this person where you're like, no human being, no system, no, like, do you know the idea of like AI writing books? If an AI wrote The Great When, then the next day it would overthrow humankind and kill us all. Because if a book got that deranged, it would have to be put down. Like, that is, if an AI system got to that level, it would be terrifying. Skynet would look at it and be like, oh, that thing's fucked. So you read Alan Moore and you're like, that's an artist. That's a guy who lost his mind and wrote a book, and we're just going to enjoy it. It's really well researched. It's really grounded in its nutcaseness, and I really enjoyed it. It has historical figures pop up, like not famous ones. It's just like random people that were famous at the time, and it just provides this level of wackiness that I really enjoyed. It was a funny book. Definitely be careful because it's written as if it's written in a society that's like 1950s. So it has a lot of bad things in it. And Alan Moore writes them in a way only Alan Moore can, which is not sensitively. So make of that what you will. But that's my list. They're all the books I read in 2024. Make of that. Do with it what you will. Buy them, don't buy them. It's your decision. I bought these ones, and I don't regret any of them. If you did enjoy, please do like, please do subscribe. And as always, have a nice rest of your day.